Hi there everyone, Lars here with some battle analyses brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And like I said in my episode 5 of the Rings of Power review and analysis, I was going to do some fight analyses and comparisons, and here they are. What I want you guys to do is this, and really, I want you to do this. Please take out a sheet of paper and a pen or a pencil. I'll give you a moment to do that. You can pause the video right here, but I need you to have a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil. You got that stuff? Excellent. Now, the reason why I want you to have this is because I want you to write down some notes as I go through these various different fight scenes. I've got quite a few of them, and I want you to rank them in whatever order or fashion you wish, basically from best to worst, or most exciting to least exciting, most interesting to least interesting, however it is you want to do it. And once you've seen all of the different fights and you've heard them and everything, I want you to comment down below with your notes. The reason why I want you to do this is because I want us to have like an honest dialogue right here. I know it's kind of difficult to do that with YouTube where it's usually someone speaking at you, but I think it would be really, really awesome to have some kind of flowing dialogue and chart going right here so that way everyone can kind of see where people land on fights, because battles are 100% subjective when it comes to what you like and what you don't like. But that being the case, we can empirically show when some fights are really good and when some fights are really bad. What I'm going to do ultimately here in this video is I'm going to compare apples to oranges. And I know that some people say, well, where are you going to get out of that? And I'm going to say, you're going to get to know who wants the apples and who wants the oranges. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at 3 of the fight scenes from Rings of Power, all 3 of which involve Galadriel. Oh boy, I know some people are already upset about that, but yes, I'm going to look at 3 of the fight scenes involving Galadriel, and I'm going to compare them to fights from other stories. We're going to look at the Badlands, we're going to look at Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind, we're going to look at the Fellowship of the Ring, and I'm going to put my own story out there to get pot shots. I'm going to show you guys, or at least read to you guys, probably one of my most frivolous, if not the most frivolous fight scene that I've written, which is found in The Knights of Halicruise, my first novel. And what we're going to do is we're going to see which of these fights is good, why is it good, and which one of these aren't good, and why they aren't good. Now, before I do that, let's have a look at the criteria by which these are going to be judged, because again, what you like is subjective. Some of these fights I'm going to enjoy and you're not, and some of the fights that I don't enjoy you might enjoy, and that's totally fine. But when it comes to learning as writers how we can write good action scenes, we want to know, well, what is something that we can concretely hold onto, so that way we can put in what we like and at least have it be put onto sturdy bones that will make it functioning. So the criteria that I'm going to be looking at is my usual analysis for a fight. What leads up to this? And what are its consequences? A fight should have lead up and it should have consequences. If it doesn't have that, even if it's an awesome fight, it won't have a very strong impact. Then let's also have a look at how does this fight help to communicate character growth? How does this fight help to communicate information? And how does this fight help to push the story forward? If it doesn't do those things through its runtime or its length, its page length, whatever it be, if it can't do any one of those 3 things, why is that fight even there? And I'm just going to say, it's one of the things that I feel that a lot of people need to kind of step back, especially when it comes to battle shonen stories or battle manhwa series. You got to ask, okay, why are these fights happening? There are some incredible battles in various shonen and manhwa serials out there, and yet, if you actually take some time and you step back and you think about what you're actually looking at, you then realize I've just read 20 to 25 chapters of this epic fight that actually didn't mean much. You could have skipped it, moved on ahead, and you really wouldn't have missed much. You just have to ask someone, okay, who's that, and why is that person missing? All right, I know everything I need to know. We're carrying on. That's not good. So we have our criteria that we're going to look at right here. Is there a lead into this fight? Are there good consequences for this fight? Does this fight help to push the story along? Does this fight help to build up characters? And does this fight help to communicate information. So, with that being said, let's have a look at two fights that are supposed to be similar. We're going to look at the Galadriel fight against the troll, and then the Fellowship of the Ring fight against the cave troll. In the Galadriel fight against the troll, the build-up to this is that Galadriel's with what's left of the Northern Army trying to find Sauron. She has already gone well beyond her orders and has gone pretty much to the edges of the world and has discovered, despite all of her people's protests and despite the horrible weather, has discovered Sauron's ancient fortress, where there happens to be a clue about where Sauron has gone. While looking for this clue, the other elves poke around and discover a snow troll. And the snow troll proceeds to just wreck the remainder of the Northern Army. You can either take this as that they are completely incompetent, or you can be gracious to the writers and say that they are exhausted after being force-marched through the snow and ice and a storm for days on end, and they just climbed up a massive cliff to get here. So they're pretty exhausted, and they get manhandled by this troll, but Galadriel shows on up. She is thrown by one of her underlings towards the troll, and she proceeds to systematically slice up the troll, weaken it so that way it comes down to her level, and then she can put her sword through its throat, rip open its jaw, and as it's bleeding out, she takes out her brother's knife and then pops it in the skull and kills it. After this fight is done, her army, or what's left of it, mutinies. They are tired, they are exhausted, they've been manhandled by the snow troll. They don't believe that the enemy is out there because this place has clearly been abandoned for hundreds of years, and Galadriel has just pushed them too far. As a result of this mutiny, Galadriel is forced to go back to Lindon, and that basically kicks off the rest of the story for Galadriel and how she will eventually end up at Numenor and everything that's going on currently within the show. So, when we look at this right here, there is a setup to this fight. It does happen, and there are consequences. In fact, pretty powerful and important consequences for Galadriel that allow the story to go forward. So, boom, right there. It would seem as though this fight has what we need thus far. This, though, is where we run into some problems, and this is why, ultimately, though it's a little bit of a flashy fight, I mean, we can say what we wish about the animation, the strings, the lines, the ropes that Galadriel is flying on. You can say what you will about that, but let's actually look at the writing within this fight. What is the information that is communicated in this fight? How is the story progressing? How is the character moving forward? We already know that the story will progress, that Galadriel is now going to return to Lindon, but when we look at the story as a whole, especially in retrospect, we begin to realize this is just a complete contrivance. This is just an interesting way to get Galadriel from point A to point B. So, well, that's kind of a little bit disappointing right there. We also learned that Galadriel is thoroughly unlikable. Yes, she completely owns the snow troll, but she is the one who basically created this entire scenario. It didn't need to happen. And she doesn't progress as a character because of it. She's angry. Even as of the most recent episode, she still blames people for the situation that she's in. She has not taken responsibility for what has happened. And the show, by its writing, has basically said, no, she was right all along, which is kind of annoying because for a character like Galadriel, she needs to be humbled at some sort of point. And the story is saying, no, you're awesome, you were right all along. So we're then supposed to accept that she was right to basically lead her army into a death trap. She was right to run them ragged. She was right to potentially get them killed. And it's kind of like, Here's the thing. I might be rambling a little bit right here, but I actually want to draw a comparison that I wasn't necessarily planning on to Master and Commander. Russell Crowe's character, he's Captain Lucky Jack, who is supposed to hunt French marauders, French privateers who are going around capturing British ships and taking all of their goods so they can't make it back to England, and France is profiting off of this piracy, the British have sent out special ships to go and hunt down these French pirates. Well, Captain Jack, he gets ambushed by one of these pirate ships, and so he's made it his mission to go hunt down these pirates, get revenge, and take their ship as a prize. But what we learn is that Captain Jack actually far exceeds his orders. He's not supposed to go around South America. He's not supposed to go to the Pacific. He chases these French pirates all the way deep into the Pacific Ocean before he finally captures them. At first blush, it would look as though Galadriel and Captain Lucky Jack are doing the exact same thing. However, a big notable difference here is this, is that Captain Jack actually has the loyalty of his entire crew. Even though there are moments where the crew becomes mutinous towards various officers under his command, the crew always believes in him because he is always kind to them. He's considerate of their opinions, of their feelings, but at the same time I'm the captain, and I know what is best for this crew, and I demand that it run tip-top, ship-shape. Everything's going to be fine. If everything's fine, we are going to get along. I will reward you guys. When you don't do what I say, there will be punishments. I will enforce that. And throughout the entire story, we actually get to see this balance of responsibility and love that the captain has for his ship and his crew and his officers. And it's a brilliant character study in leadership. Galadriel just demands that people follow her, and what does she do to give anyone comfort? She doesn't actually comfort anyone after they get manhandled by the troll. The best that we've seen is that she gave someone a raggedy blanket while they were freezing to death. So when we look at how the characters being progressed forward here in this fight, the answer is she's not. The information that is being communicated to us is that Galadriel's awesome and that she is a force to be reckoned with. But other information that's being communicated to us, though that was definitely not the intention of the writers, is that the Northern Army cannot beat Sauron. How are they going to defeat a massive army of orcs when one troll can nearly wipe all of them out? What is Galadriel doing as far as a leader? She's running what's left of her army absolutely ragged, and it will be destroyed. This information is then contradicted by the shows telling us that she's amazing in everything, and that she's always right. So this fight becomes really ridiculous. People treated it as something ridiculous when episode 1 premiered, but now that we are coming up on episode 6 and we look back at this fight is even more so ridiculous because it is almost schizophrenic in what it's trying to and what it's not trying to communicate about Galadriel. And it's just basically a forceful step from point A to point B. None of it really feels earned or necessarily natural. Now, we compare this to the fight against the troll in the Fellowship of the Ring, which I've had running at the exact same time this whole time. What I hope that you're getting out of this is that this particular fight right here is something pretty different right here. When we have a look at the setup and the consequences of this particular fight, the Fellowship has finally come together. We now know that Frodo must go on his quest to destroy the ring. He has chosen, he's accepted it, and Saruman has been throwing all these things against them, trying to force the Fellowship to come close to Isengard via the Gap of Rohan, which will make it very easy for him to lay a trap and ensnare the outnumbered Fellowship and bring the ring back to Isengard, and thus the quest will be for a loss, and Sauron will reign supreme over all of Middle-earth. So in order for them to somehow complete the quest, they have to go into Moria, which is a massive gamble. Moria has been shut for a very long time. Gimli claims that Balin is there ready to receive them should they come on in, but when they arrive, they find that no, the dwarves have been butchered within Moria. Goblins have taken hold. A monster, the Watcher in the Water, was placed there to capture anyone who tried to come through the gate, and they are forced into Moria, and they are caught. This actually ends up being a really good thing because this allows Gollum to not die. Gollum has been stuck in Moria, and Gollum is essential to the ultimate success of the quest to destroy the One Ring. But not only that, this now allows the Fellowship to move on through, and we learn a lot about the world, at least the world underneath, and we then eventually get to the tomb where Balin is at, where Pippin makes the fateful mistake of, whoop, I'm messing around with a corpse I shouldn't, and now everyone can hear that we're there. And then, boom, small contingent of goblins come with a cave troll. As a result of the Fellowship actually eventually winning this very hard slug fight, they race to the bridge of Khazad-dûm, being chased by a Balrog. The Balrog and Gandalf fight, and both of them fall into the abyss far below Moria. This removes a very powerful member of the Fellowship and puts a lot of doubt into the hearts of Aragorn and Boromir, which will set them at odds and eventually lead Boromir to attacking Frodo, which will completely break the Fellowship. There are a lot of massive consequences for everyone in this group, and none the least of which is Gandalf. Gandalf, through this fight, will defeat a Balrog, be given a second chance at succeeding in his quest to help defeat Sauron, and be reborn as Gandalf the White. So this fight is absolutely monumental in terms of its buildup and its overall consequences for multiple characters. Within the fight itself, there's a lot that is actually going on here, especially a lot of stuff that's happening for the characters. Aragorn really fulfills his oath to Frodo that by life or by death he will do everything in his power to protect Frodo. We then also have the hobbits. The hobbits are not accustomed to battle. They've gotten beaten multiple times up until this point, basically being helped by everyone else along the way. The hobbits now stand their ground, draw their very first blood, and it's a really crazy fight in which everyone thinks that Frodo dies. We then also get to see the honor of Boromir as he stands to fight. He is a man of honor. He is a man of action. This is also probably the coolest that we should actually have ever seen of Legolas right here, because this was really awesome. Anything beyond this point really does begin to stretch the realms of what should be possible within Middle-earth. So that's kind of a little bit of a negative, but it's a fun one. And Gimli preserves his honor as a dwarf. There is a lot of stuff happening for the different characters in this fight. A lot of information is being communicated to us about pretty much the culture of the Moria orcs or goblins, and also we get to see that Mithril does indeed come in handy. Without Mithril, Frodo would have been killed. So there's a whole lot that is going on, and again, as far as like pushing along the story goes, this just makes sense what is going on here. The setup, where they are at, and it works as a really good fight. And this is obviously subjective on my part, but I really do like how it's full-blown chaos in a very tight space. And we get to see the heroes really struggle. Galadriel didn't struggle at all against the snow troll. Even the best of fighters, Aragorn, Gandalf, Boromir, Legolas, everyone is struggling against this troll, and it really has you at the edge of your seat. So when I stop just for a brief moment right here and say I hope that you've been taking down some notes about these different fights. Well, hopefully you've been writing down some of the stuff that has come to you, what you yourself have observed, because I'm really looking forward to seeing that stuff in the comments. Now then, let's move on to another battle. Galadriel versus the guards. Oh, this is just bad. This is just bad. Okay, once again, we have set up Galadriel's badmouth the queen. She is going to be deported back to Middle-earth. And when the guards come, she busts on out. She slaps them around. She walks them on into her cell, locks them on up. Men of Numenor. A lot of people have already brought this up, but I'm going to bring this up again. Numenorians are tall and powerful and fearsome. Even the elves are just like, woo, chilled in their presence. The fact that Galadriel's manhandling a bunch of Numenorians is really silly. Another thing is this, she's slapping them. I don't know if any of you have actually ever fought someone in armor, or have at least played rough with someone who is in full American football gear, but slapping a helmet hurts. You don't want to do it, and it doesn't mean anything to the person who is in it. If you're going to fight barehanded against someone who is in a helmet, you have to put your body into it and go for their face and then try to shove them down, or take advantage of the fact that they're connected to their helmet and try to get a weakness therein on their neck. Simply slapping or shoving isn't going to do a whole lot. You want to hold on and then use your own weight and force to try to throw them off balance. That's just a little bit of fighting stuff right there. After this fight, Galadriel is free to run off to meet the queen, and thus we have her whole conversation with the queen and with the vision of the Palantir, and again, the plot moves along, rewarding Galadriel for what she's done. What kind of information do we learn here in this fight? How has the story progressed? How's the character progressed? It's the exact same thing as the fight with the troll. All the information that's being communicated to us is that Galadriel's awesome and that stuff is going to happen. There's really nothing that we get out of this fight. Now then, there were a lot of people on Twitter who were trying to defend this little fight, saying, well, she's a powerful elf. Of course she's going to absolutely win. I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to pull out some lore and just be all like, look, elves are really strong and powerful, but elves can also be cheap-shotted by any human or elf. If the elves were really all that strong, again, the elves should have absolutely wiped the floor with one lone snow troll back in episode 1. If the elves had always been really that powerful, the elves would have defeated Morgoth after just a couple of battles. The thing is that while the elves are very skilled and maybe have a little bit more strength than your average human, they can still be overwhelmed by numbers and be brought down by either a lucky shot or by someone who has good skill. This is one of the reasons why the Uruk-hai were absolutely daunting, because now you have orcs almost at the same height and level of physicality as an elf, maybe even more so. And so that was something that was meant to be very terrifying. Galadriel owning all of these humans, yes, she's a powerful elf, but they're Númenóreans. It should actually balance itself out a little bit. And this fight scene could have been really awesome if we had actually seen her grappling, reversing grips on people's weapons and like shoving their swords at them, tripping them up at the feet or at the ankles, at the knees, doing stuff to bring them down, using skill to overcome their physicality and strength. That would have been really cool to see, but we just don't see. In fact, we don't even see how she gets most of them into the prison cell. So I returned to Twitter, and the reason why is because while people were trying to defend this particular fight, other people were saying, hey, look, other awesome fights have been done with women that are actually really, really good, and I'm going to use two of them that were suggested there on Twitter. First one is from the Badlands, episode 2, as we get to see the Widow come on into a bar and wipe out all of these different assassins. The lead up to this is that she has taken out her husband. She wants to inherit his barony and basically be one of the most powerful people within the Badlands. However, though she is a force herself to be reckoned with, she needs organization, she needs leadership, she needs loyal people. So she has come to gather said people in order to make sure that her barony functions correctly. Unfortunately, she's walked into a trap, and she loses a very powerful ally to an assassin. This requires then that she fights off all of the assassins who have been summoned to get rid of her, so that way her barony can be usurped by another person. So she fights her way on through. It's absolutely ridiculous. Those heels are awesome. It's meant to be ridiculous right here. And honestly, that's totally fine. I'm totally fine with an illogically looking fight, so long as it adheres to the things that we need within a good fight. Because once she's done, she now knows who has hired the assassins, she now knows who she's going to fight against, and this sets up a villain dynamic throughout the rest of Season 1 of the Badlands. On top of that, we actually learn a lot about the Widow's character. She is very much self-assured. She is someone who gives into anger very easily. She is someone, or at least within this context right here, and we see that she is very intelligent. She's got a good eye for people. She's able to take in her surroundings. She is a survivor. She didn't just simply take something that someone else had. No, the Widow is someone who you can believe can really build up this barony and be a force to be reckoned with. We learn a lot really about her character just observing this, and there's almost no dialogue to actually go off of. It's all just in what we can observe. And this fight helps to push along an important subplot throughout the rest of the show. There's a lot of information that's being communicated to us in this fight. As someone who doesn't even actually know all that much about the Badlands, and I know for some people like, wait, what? This discredits your whole argument. Actually, not really. For someone who just saw this fight scene, I was like, wait, what? Oh, that's awesome. And so I started looking and watching stuff. I started researching stuff. And holy cow, like it opened up all of these new possibilities for me and actually confirmed a lot of the stuff that I saw in that fight. That's how I know it was a good fight, was because for someone who has no idea what's going on, I watched the fight makes sense, and when I go to then start watching and reading more about the show, everything falls into place beautifully. That is a coherent, logical fight. Then another fight scene that was used as an apples to oranges comparison is when Nausicaa fights to save her father, or actually really more to avenge her father, in the movie Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. And I love that we're getting the redheads representing here, just gonna say. But Nausicaa comes on in. She doesn't even have a sword, but she has a well-forged cane from ohm material, which is very, very good. It's better than most of the steel that people have. And she uses it to just crush people on in. And one of the great things about this is because there's always those people are like, little girls couldn't actually fight against bigger people because of blah, blah, blah. Surprisingly enough, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind has an explanation for that. The people of the valley are basically Vikings. They are incredibly strong, though they are usually pacifists. But just because they're pacifists doesn't mean they aren't survivors. These people have lived on the fringes of the world through sheer grit. As such, if they go into that berserker rage, they can take on multiple people. And if you equip them well, they will kill dozens, as we actually get to see later on in the movie. So Nausicaa is just one of her people. And like many of the women, we see that they are vicious when provoked. And with having actually a better weapon, even though it's a cane, it's better forged, she can just smash through the weaker weapons and break people's bones, snap them in half, and she kills a number of people. However, what is really cool is that when the fully armored soldiers come on in, even though she's got a sword and she's ready to go to town, she has to be stopped by Lord Yupa because she will lose. It doesn't matter how much rage she has, and even if she has a little bit of skill, these men are also very skilled, they are larger, and they are better equipped to deal with her. So Lord Yupa comes in and stops the fight in such a cool way. I love Lord Yupa. Why do we not get to see more of this guy just trashing people is beyond me, because I freaking love this guy. But I also love what Nausicaa's doing right here. From this point on, so the setup. The setup for this fight, the Tolmekian army comes in to claim a weapon that they feel was being stolen from them and has crash landed into the Valley of the Wind. And so they conquer the valley, take back the weapon, and they slay the king, Nausicaa's dad, in order to usurp control over the people of the valley. And Nausicaa comes on in, tries to save her dad, sees that he's been killed, and so she flies into a rage. She is captured, and she will then be taken prisoner, which then leads to the rest of her adventure throughout the story. So we have set up the execution, the massive consequences for Nausicaa, but in fact actually goes even deeper. This is actually probably the deepest fight in the entire lineup thus far. Nausicaa realizes that killing people is kind of bad. Even though it's necessary, she feels awful for having taken another life, especially as someone who has lived most of her life as a pacifist. As a result of that, right there, she begins to change even more as an individual, and she adopts a way more helpful philosophy, a way more pacifist personality, which ends up proving crucial to saving everyone by the end of the movie. And it's just, wow. Like, when you watch Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, there's so much rich world building. And in this fight alone, we get to see a brilliant demonstration of ohm material, the quality of different nations and their forging material, the use of technology, the use of battle styles, the heritage of Nausicaa and her people in 50 seconds. So much is either communicated or confirmed that is just, wow. It is an overload of just fantastic information. Now then, we come to the third Galadriel fight. Galadriel training all of these Númenórean cadets to get ready to invade Middle-earth. Again, these are Númenóreans. They should be fantastic fighters and have just incredible strength and size and skill. We don't really get to see any of that here, so this is obviously not lore accurate. The thing is that this could have actually been a really good scene, and it's a scene that's kind of interesting because I have talked with a number of people about this. There's a lot of people who really enjoyed it and a lot of people who absolutely despise it. One of the reasons why I feel that people enjoy this little fight is not just because, hey, there's action going on, but because it's an action scene that is trying to communicate quite a few things. So, as the setup goes, Numenor is getting ready to invade Middle-earth and defeat the orcs in the Southlands. And as part of the payoff, this is actually a highly inconsequential fight because Isildur's friend becoming an officer doesn't really matter at all within the overall story, nor is anything really of value really communicated other than that Halbrand and Galadriel can flourish swords really nicely. Galadriel's character is also not progressed in any kind of way other than if you kind of take the way that she's grinning and so happy as an indicator. It's that, why is Galadriel fighting? Galadriel's fighting not because she wants revenge, she's fighting because she just enjoys it at this point. Which could be interesting, but the show, again, demands later on in this episode that's not the case. That she's just so driven to do what is right and defeat evil. So the information that's being communicated to us isn't much, and it's actually contradicted by stuff later on. It's purely inconsequential to any of the stuff that's going on there within the story. It's inconsequential for any of the characters. The only thing that it can really tell us is that it can give us information about fighting. Now, this is one of those things that I think that's why people are really pulled in. It's not just because, hey, there's some action, but it's action with speak as we learn how to fight the orcs. Fight with your feet and not with your arms, haha, and all of this stuff. It's just that the information that is being communicated to us in this fight is actually being contradicted by what we then see in the fight. Now then, in a conversation I've had with other people who are like, well, that's an issue for the choreographers. Maybe, maybe not. I definitely agree that there's probably some miscommunication with the choreographers about what needs to be happening in relation to the dialogue that's being spoken because it's not adding up properly. But as writers, you are in control of all of that. So you definitely want to make sure that actions are being complemented by words when you are writing your action scenes. So ultimately, my feeling of this fight is that it's completely frivolous. This battle against all of these cadets means nothing in the overall story. It doesn't communicate anything of value to us, and what it does communicate is contradicted later on. It doesn't move forward the story. Its payoff actually, even though its overall payoff doesn't even matter, so as a result, this is a frivolous fight. Now then, I want to actually compare that with what I myself admit is probably my most frivolous fight from my first novel, Knights of Halicruz. In this particular book, there is a fight where I introduce one of the main characters. His name is Lagerblad. Lagerblad has been basically hired to assassinate Lord Andrew. Lord Andrew is one of the most powerful people upon the world of Halicruz. He has the ability to use his imagination like magic. Basically, anything he wants to have happen can happen. So if you're going to get rid of a guy that powerful, you need to have someone else who is equally as powerful, or maybe has a couple of tricks up their sleeves. Lagerblad is meant to be a bit of an enigma in the first book, and when I introduce him, you don't fully know what's going on. And in fact, you as the reader, when you're reading this through the first time, there's terminology that is used in conjunction with his chapters that doesn't become normal speak until later on in the series, helping to indicate, spoilers, that Lagerblad knows way more about what's going on than might be hinted at earlier in the story. So he's obviously a dangerous person, but to help communicate that, I used this fight. Now then, this fight in many ways is absolutely frivolous. Lagerblad is taking his time to hunt down Lord Andrew because he's new to this planet. And he's just kind of taking it in. He's strolling around. He's very confident that he will catch Andrew within time. And he walks through this little village that has obviously been taken over by a bunch of ruffians. The war that is happening throughout the series has broken up all forms of cohesiveness between kingdoms and the centralized government of this world. And so this allows for little small areas to be overrun by ruffians. Well, Lagerblad walks on through. He is accosted and stopped by these guards, quote unquote, and he's just like, screw you, and just walks through completely like he owns the place. It spooks them, and they run off to go grab up more guys. He then goes, gets some food at the local tavern, and he wants to get some information as well. This leads to a conversation. Meanwhile, he's like, those guys are going to come back. I'm just going to stay here. I'm going to wait for them to come to me, and then I'll show them what's for. And that is then where we get to this fight in my book, which I'm going to read. Lord Andrew must die. Lagerblad flicked the second coin to Hadley and said, Thank you, friend. You've been helpful and hospitable. The White Knight removed his helmet and began to eat the simple meal that was before him. Hadley flinched as he saw Lagerblad. His presence, once revealed, usually overwhelmed people to some degree, so he did his best to keep its power to a minimum when out on missions. That was until it was time to get serious. He smiled patiently and said, Please, don't worry. If it helps, I'll turn a little and avert my eyes. Then you can admire my handsome side. Lagerblad made a show of shifting, showing off the light scars across his face and averting his red eyes until they cooled down to a dull crimson. The bartender laughed weakly at this and shuffled off, storing the coins away as Lagerblad continued to chow away. He was done with the bread and chicken by the time the gang of thugs, or the village guards as Hadley referred to them, finally showed up. Lagerblad popped the last of the grapes into his mouth and then said, You're a little late, boys. I'd expected better of you. 11 men entered the room. 2 of them were the village guards Lagerblad had scared earlier. 3 men had crossbows trained on him, and 3 others wielded swords. The rest sported various farming tools for weapons. Oi, these men said you resisted paying the necessary toll to enter town, the leader of the small group said. He was a lanky man with a thin mustache, and, like most of his companions, he was in desperate need for a bath. His foul odor reached across the room. He was one of the 3 with swords. You will give up all but your undergarments to us, and then you will leave here immediately. Comply now, we might just let you go without a scratch. This is the price for your trespass and disrespect. Lagerblad heard Hadley squeak and duck away. Lagerblad reached for his helmet. As he replaced it on his head, metal swam like living water, reconnecting the pieces of his armor, creating an impenetrable shell. Turning around slowly, Lagerblad said lazily, You there, leader. I think I shall call you Mr. Stick. I have no intention of giving anything of mine to you. Trust me, you wouldn't be able to use it even if you wanted to, even if I let you. But if you wish to leave this village without so much as a scratch, you will all drop your weapons at once and send the real leader of your gang here so I may dispose of him. Then you will be free to leave this village and never return. Otherwise, I will cut you all down where you stand. This is the price for taking away the livelihoods and peace of the people in this village. His confident tone made all the men squirm with discomfort. Most looked to Mr. Stick as if they either wanted to leave or needed reassurance that they could take on such a man. Stick seemed furious, though, at being called names and being addressed so nonchalantly. He was also off-put because their ruse of him as the leader had failed instantly. Lagerblad wondered who the leader was, that he was such a coward not to come in person. You speak funny, stranger, and you'll pay for that lip. Fire! Mr. Stick yelled at the archers. 3 quarrels launched straight for him. Lagerblad caught one between 2 fingers and flicked it back at the owners. The other 2 clanged harmlessly off his armor. The returning quarrel lodged itself right in the archer's left eye. He dropped backwards without so much as a groan. Willing himself to become indomitable in battle, Lagerblad swept out his sword and charged the nearest ruffian. The man held up a pitchfork and squeezed his eyes shut. Lagerblad rolled to the left and sidestepped the pitchfork. The ruffian never knew what happened before his head was sheared from his shoulders. Lagerblad then jumped onto a table and rained blows down on the 2 men who had guarded the back entrance to the village. In 4 strikes, both men were completely disarmed and stood there in shock as they bled out through their stumps. They did not die slow deaths. The White Knight jumped from the table, his feet crushing their heads to the ground. He then propelled himself at the next archer, who was clumsily loading his next quarrel. Lagerblad swung his sword up and sliced the man in half. Another ruffian with a rusty hammer stood between Lagerblad and Mr. Stick. The knight grabbed the man's arm and flung him across the room. His body sank into the wall with a grisly crunch. Mr. Stick kept enough composure to ready himself for a fight. Their blades met once before Lagerblad impaled him through the heart. He snatched up the man's sword from his limp fingers. The remaining 4 ruffians attempted to scatter and flee. Lagerblad rushed one of them from behind and beheaded him by crossing his 2 swords. He then saw from the corner of his visor one of the men attempting to swing over the bar and retreat through the same door Hadley had. Lagerblad threw his stolen blade right through the man's chest. The force of the blow brought the thug forward with such force that he was pinned to the countertop. Another quarrel came flying at him. Lagerblad deflected it with his sword, as though it were a second thought. He picked up a chair in one hand and flung it at the archer, hitting him in the head with enough force that his neck snapped. The last member of the village guard left alive in the common room cowered under a table. Lagerblad pulled him out, and the man began to scream and beg for his life. The knight hauled him to the front door and threw him out first. 2 bows twanged, and the man was hit once in the neck and into the lung. He crumpled to the side, exposing 2 more bowmen. Lagerblad saw that these were the gang's only remaining bowmen. He took in the sight of 4 others waiting for him outside of the inn. The man who had hung back the most was dressed in a finely embroidered tunic and balloon pants. He had a waxed mustache and long, greasy hair, and in his hand was a rapier. Besides the 2 bowmen, there was a hulking figure in leather armor who wielded a battle axe and a broadsword in his meaty hands. Lagerblad grinned from beneath his helm. These bullies were no match for his will. "I knew Mr. Stick couldn't have been the leader," Lagerblad called out. "From where I'm standing, I can see that you are the coward who just let 11 men die for you. What a waste, especially considering how you will be dead within 2 minutes." The cowardly leader tried laughing and taunted with a shrill voice. "Oh yeah? How are you going to do that when I'm all the way over here and I've got Bernd alongside me, the best fighter in the region?" He suddenly paled as Lagerblad seemingly appeared out of thin air, his cloak billowing behind him as the 2 archers fell in half behind him. Both were perfectly bisected across the middle. "They shouldn't have stayed so close together," Lagerblad counseled with a cold voice. The giant of a man Bernd charged the White Knight, swinging his axe like a cleaver. Lagerblad caught the axe in one hand and intercepted the broadsword with his own hand-and-a-half blade. The giant, however, was no novice and continued forward. Lagerblad rolled backwards and kicked at the other man's legs, tripping him and sending him somersaulting forward. The knight jumped back to his feet and cut the warrior's lower back open, disabling him from the waist down. He turned back to see a knife flying at him. It bounced off his armor, just like the quarrels had. The leader of the village guard turned tail and ran, for all his greasy life was worth. Lagerblad sprinted and caught up to him before a child could count to 3. His gleaming blade went through the leader's chest, and he swung upwards, cleaving the man's head in 2. Lagerblad turned back to the giant, who was crawling for his broadsword. Bernd reached for his weapon and twisted back and shouted in agony, "What kind of monster are you? I don't even see any blood on you or your weapon. Why is that? What are you?" Lagerblad responded with a rattling breath and said, "Fire." His will and presence washed over the town, but were specifically concentrated on Bernd. The giant was instantly consumed by flames. He screamed once before being reduced to ash. All right, and there you have it. That is my most frivolous fight in all of the stories that I've written thus far. One of the reasons for that is because, well, from this point on, Lagerblad kind of makes peace with the town. The townsfolk are really upset that their guards are dead even though they were ruffians, because now they feel vulnerable. Lagerblad hands them some money and says, "Figure it out for yourselves," and proceeds to go forth on his quest. Lagerblad is never haunted by any of these deaths because, well, as you find out, he's killed quite a few people, and he's kind of come to terms with all of that long ago. So, really, as far as what this means for the character, not a whole lot. I leave it up to you as the readers and as the listeners to kind of decide, what do you actually learn of Lagerblad from this particular encounter? Does it really progress the overall story along? Like I said, it is a frivolous fight, and it's definitely not my best written fight either. I can definitely see some mistakes. Some of the sentences are a little tad too long, and so forth. Also saying that he was struck once in the lung and once in the neck, when really there's 2 arrows, so obviously one in the neck, one in the lung. Just say he was hit in the neck and the lung. Yeah, there's some things you can definitely do to kind of edit it down a little bit more, make it flow way better. Here I am critiquing my own work. See, we can learn from this. I published this story because I was like, it's the best that I can do at the time, and I've learned and I've grown as an author since then. I look at him like, yeah, it's definitely a novice's first major novel. I've gotten better. So now I leave it to you guys. I want to hear from you down in the comments where you rate all of these different fights. The 3 Galadriel fights, her fighting the Snow Troll, her fighting against the Númenórean guards, and her training session. You then you have the Fellowship of the Rings cave troll fight. You also have Nausicaa fighting off the Tolmekians. You have the awesome bar fight with the widow from the Badlands, and then you have Lagerblad's big rumble in the little town, as I call it, from Knights of Halicruise. tell me where you ranked all of these stories. Of course, I'm really curious about where you might have ranked my story. But I really hope that we can get some good dialogue going here in the comments about why you rank certain fights, how you rank them, and see what you think of my specific breakdown and analysis. As you have seen, I haven't gotten really big into specifics of how a fight plays out, and that comes down honestly to each individual story. If you're writing a boxing match or a duel between wizards or an epic joust or lightsaber duels, what have you, the rules of how that fight is going to play out will depend on the world building rules of that story, as well as where you want the narrative and the characters to go. But understanding proper setup for the fight, proper consequences, and communicating information, character development, and plot development through a fight are all essential for making a fight feel meaty and feel alive. If you don't have that stuff, it's just frivolous action, which will be easily mocked and just as easily forgotten, which we don't want to have happen to your stories. So that's all I've got to say for this particularly long video right here. I hope you've enjoyed it. Again, I'm really looking forward to your comments down below. And yeah, if you're looking for more writing advice, getting a little bit deeper into various topics and the likes, please check out our other videos here on our YouTube channel. You can also head on over to our podcast, Camille's Harem, found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We have writing exercises for all you novice authors to check out over at our Pinterest page, and we would love for you to join our ever-growing community of novice authors. Links for all of that and more are down in the description below. And until the next video, y'all, write those action scenes awesome and well. And I just can't wait to see more great action from you guys. And tschüss.